All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us on our podcast 83. This week, of course, I'm joined by Deena Bosworth and Meghann Keit, both from the MAC staff. As a friendly reminder, you can always ask questions and type it into the chat, and we'll leave time at the end for some questions. But a great lineup. It's been a few weeks since we were able to talk, but there's been plenty of issues coming about both at the state and federal level. So first, Meghann, I'm going to turn it over to you, and why don't you provide a little bit of an update on the supplemental bill that budget supplemental bill that we've been kind of tracking.
Yeah, absolutely. The House and the Senate have been moving forward and trying to figure out how they are going to allocate some of these COVID relief funds that the state of Michigan received last December from the federal government. The House passed actually a few weeks ago now, a $3.5 billion plan. This had funding for SNAP benefits to be extended, emergency rental assistance, COVID testing, contact tracing, and a large portion of that was also for the federal aid for schools. The House included about $1.8 billion of that to go out to schools, and then also included a large portion for business relief, small business relief programs, $150 million for unemployment trust fund that is largely supported by our business groups here. And so, the Senate moved forward on a couple of those things. They actually went forward and supported a total of $593 million for that, the business part of it, the small business relief. But they have some different numbers on the school funding and other areas. So their plan, the Senate, was about $2 billion that just passed last week. Had money for vaccine distribution, COVID testing, that sort of thing. One thing they did differ on was they included $150 million for a increase to our direct care worker wage of $2.25 an hour. This has kept getting extended since last March, but this would increase it to $2.25 an hour, and that would last through September 30th. This also passed on party line because they had some floor debate on some language that got in their proposal on how vaccine distribution would work. Right now, the Department of Health and Human Services is using what's known as the Social Vulnerability Index. This is something that the CDC puts out. They have adopted that, and there are just some members, largely Republican members, that felt that did not get to the most vulnerable populations, and they don't want to see that method used. So we did see a party line vote on both of those, and the governor has really been pushing to get the full $5.6 billion included in the plan. So there's some differences in the proposals. We understand that the House and the Senate are likely to come together this week, reconcile their differences, and put something to the governor.
Yeah, that's great news.
Do you think they'll put all 5.6 in there? Or are they still holding some back?
Yeah, I think that the Republicans on both the House and the Senate side are really, wanting to hold some of that back, make sure they have a larger say in how that funding is going to be allocated. And so I think, that may be part that the governor needs to negotiate. They both had some things in there that, she didn't like either, just besides not the full funding. The House included some tie bars to the money that would take away the DHHS epidemic order power and shift some of that to our local health departments. She hasn't supported that as well. So there's still a lot to be negotiated with the governor.
So yeah, it sounds like they're holding money back too. Yeah, just so that they can be more part of the conversation. Right. But that's a lot of money to leave on the table, isn't it?
It is. So
5.6.
Yeah, and even if they don't get all of it appropriated now, we're probably going to be talking about the next round of supplemental right after this is done, plus the budget going on. So so it's pretty nonstop.
Yeah, well, meanwhile, there's another budget that was presented a few weeks ago. So, Deena, why don't you kick us off and talk a little bit about that budget? The supplementals, one piece of legislation, and then we have the governor presented her budget to the legislature. Talk a little bit about that, her budget and what that looks like.
Yeah, so what Meghann was talking about was the 2021 budget year, the governor came out with her executive recommendation for the fiscal year 22 budget. So that's the budget that starts this coming October 1st. And in that, it was not necessarily earth shattering. There's some newer programs in there, but there are some numbers in there that look really positive for counties. First of all, she recommended a 2% increase in our statutory revenue sharing. So that's about $4.6 million increase in county statutory revenue sharing. Mac, we've looked at that and we continue to look at that on a regular basis. We still have some proposals to push back on that a little bit. We'd like to see a little bit greater of an increase, sort of rectify some of the wrongs from the past, but we can get into that, further in our committees and talk about those details. Also part of the revenue sharing proposal, we're trying to get some forgiveness. There were a couple of counties out there that were not able to utilize all of their August revenue sharing payment. Remember that August revenue sharing payment was switched with federal relief dollars, and so it had to be used for COVID-related expenses. There were a few counties out there and lots of municipalities that weren't able to utilize all of those funds and change them right, kind of right at the end of their fiscal year. So we're asking for forgiveness on that. It's really not that much money. It's like $500,000. Let's see. She did propose more infrastructure monies. She's got $300 million in there for one-time funding to work on 120 bridges across the state that are considered critical. Frankly, that's just nowhere near the need. But it does address those, I think it's 56 of them immediately. But there's 120 bridges that are in critical need and in the plan right now. She again reiterated her $290 million Michigan Clean Water Plan that deals with public sewers, sewer overflows, the combined sewer problems, cleaning up sanitary sewers out there. Again, she reiterated that $15 million for a dam emergency safety fund so that we don't have, we can kind of catch some of these dams that are in as bad of a condition as the Sanford Dam and have some money in there just for some emergency repair. $40 million for high water resiliency infrastructure grants. So some of that is planning, some of that is dealing with soil erosion and some of the high water stuff that we have out there. So those individual grants can go out for different infrastructure projects to deal with high water. I think that's about it for infrastructure. I know, Megan, you were going to talk a little bit about all the health and human services and the judiciary recommendations.
Yeah, some highlights for members. We had the governor recommended $148.9 million in grants for MIDC funds. So we now have moved past the standards 1 through 4, and we have standard 5 approved as well, which is a requirement to be independent of the judiciary. So there was an increase on that line item. A lot of things did remain pretty flat. $12.9 million for secondary road patrol. We were happy to see $4 million included for the County Veteran Service Fund. This is something that the legislature put forward in 2017. We've seen the governor in the past recommend a $2 million cut to that, and so we were excited to see that full funding presented this year. $9 million for the Raise the Age Fund, which is something we got set up in statute in order to address non-eligible child care fund reimbursements. So anything that isn't reimbursable at 100% through the child care fund, counties can submit through DHHS and the Raise the Age Fund to get reimbursed for things like additional court staff, referees, attorneys, things that we'll see needed when you have an additional increase of 17-year-olds coming into the system. Couple other ones, for $14.8 million for county jail reimbursement program, and then also the local public health services line remained flat at $51.4 million.
A couple things about that. First of all, and I'm just going to take this, we didn't plan this, but Meghann did an exceptional job on that raise the age of negotiation. Like having that separate line item amount on top of 100% reimbursement and child care fund. I remember her working day and night to get that done. So to see that in the budget is it's fantastic. So great work. And then the County Veteran Service Fund, you're fixing that too, aren't you, for fiscal year 21? Are you fixing?
Yes, so we do have a bill introduced. Representative Glenn introduced a bill, House Bill 4122. It had a hearing last week. Really, it was just implementation looks a little different than what was originally put in statute. And so we put some new timeframes in there to get the money out. Also some exceptions for this fiscal year for counties' maintenance of effort. So in the past, they had to maintain anything they were at the 2017 levels. We've had some counties reach out, and just with all the devastation of COVID, they weren't even able to be eligible this year. And so we put a 1-year waiver in essentially so that they could still maintain eligibility, get those $50,000 grants, make sure that they're supporting their veteran community with those funds, and something the department was very happy to do. And I think we have a lot of support in the legislature. So it's good news on the County Veteran Service Fund front.
Good.
And that was for 2020. That exemption or that waiver would be for 2020, correct?
So actually, we were able to get that adjusted for fiscal years 21 and 22. So this upcoming year as well, because obviously we still have counties that maybe will have difficulty trying to be eligible for that.
Right. Well, great. So overall, a decent budget for us, would you guys say?
Yeah, I would say a decent budget for us.
Pretty boring.
But, you know, I think that they've got extra funds right now. I think they've got, well, you're going to talk about the federal stimulus, Steve, so or the federal relief package. So now's the time, I think, to make our asks for whatever we want. I don't know if we'll get it, but.
Yeah, I think, you know, as we can transition right into that. The American Rescue Plan, which is now passed as of Friday or Saturday, I can't remember, but out of the House at the federal level. Some significant funds for counties in that package as well. Huge investment into local governments in that package of bills, or in that bill, I guess it is. $65 billion, I believe, for the country for county government. Michigan, it gets about 1.9 billion of that, and that would be direct funding for every county in the state of Michigan. It'd be dispersed based on population. So every county would be eligible for these funds. They could opt not to take them if they would wish. But the guidelines for using these funds is pretty vague still. When you look at what they're saying can be used for, it can be for revenue loss due to COVID. It could be economic hardship, however you define that, due to COVID. Obviously, costs you can calculate fairly easily, but unprecedented amount of money coming to counties from the federal government. I think everyone needs to watch that and be aware of that.
I think that's amazing. I know, and we talked about this earlier in our meeting, some concerns about how you would allocate those funds or utilize those funds. And just a couple of things I think everybody needs to keep in mind. You're going to see some property tax revenue declines due to COVID. Now, you know, I think residential housing has been great, but commercial buildings are pretty much vacant. And I think you're going to see some, you know, property tax valuation changes there. So that could be it. Economic hardship. You know, that when you were just saying that, Steve, it made me think of labor negotiations, contract negotiations with a lot of the unions who are going to want to ensure that hazard pay is part of their new labor contracts, you know, things like that. So when would they have to spend these monies?
There is no time frame at this point, deadline that they would have to spend it. So yeah, I think it's on a lot of the things you were even mentioning there, it's too early to tell what some of the impact of COVID is going to be. I mean, we're a year into this and still a lot of uncertainty out there. You know, and there needs to be obviously some investment in some of our communities too. When you start talking about what the work school transition or the push has been for remote learning, online availability, access, a lot of our communities need to invest in some of or need to have some investment in some of the broadband capabilities. And I think you know, we could see some of these funds be freed up for that purpose as well. which I think is great. I mean, I think that's great that a
Yeah.
lot of these, not just rural, but urban areas as well, where accessibility becomes a problem. So.
I
Well,
remember it took them a long, I'm sorry, I would just remember it took them a long time to get guidance out on CARES Act dollars. And they kept revising them. We kept asking more questions and they kept revising them. So I'm assuming it's going to be, similar in nature to what can you spend the money on and how can we figure a way around it.
Yeah, I think U.S. Treasury will come out with guidelines once everything is finalized through Congress. So, and then finally, Meghann or Deena, Open Meetings Act. Where are we at with that? We're into March now. I know we have a deadline coming up. The ability for counties to meet remotely, that deadline is coming up, and we need to make our folks aware of some things.
Yeah, the deadline for no reason virtual meetings is the end of this month. And that's it. And then if a county or, a governing body declares a state of emergency, then they can continue to meet remotely, for however long that's in place, but only until the end of this year. I know we've heard from many counties that they don't like that provision. They want to be able to vote remotely if they have a quorum. They want to be able to participate remotely if possible, and don't necessarily like those restrictions. Now, Meghann knows this too. The legislature really doesn't seem to be inclined to extend that March 31st deadline for no reason virtual meetings. I'm not sure if it's that big of a deal for the smaller, like appointed boards that are subject to the Open Meetings Act, but for the bigger bodies, the counties, the county commissions, the cities, the townships, the school boards, they want them in person, if at all possible, unless there's a state of emergency, unless it's not safe. The problem is that are you in violation of the DHHS orders when it comes to capacity and how many people you can have in a room? We do know, I think we learned today, Meghann, didn't we, that the governor's expected to have a press conference to talk a little bit about those DHHS orders in the next week.
We expect to hear some changes to the orders tomorrow.
Yeah. So, we'll see then. There's going to be legislation that moves through, at least we're hopeful that there is, that deals with some of these appointed boards and whether you're regularly elected to that board or not regularly elected to that board. But I mean, we're still going to continue to ask, number one, don't have to disclose if you're from a remote location where you are. And we're going to continue to ask for an extension of that no reason virtual participation. It's just, I'm not quite sure what the appetite of the legislature is on that at this point.
Well, great. Derek, do we have any questions?
Yes, sir, we do. First question from Vaughn Beggick up in Bay County. Any chance to get changes to some of the old veterans legislation from 1899 for indigent relief?
Vaughn, 1899? Holy cow. We might have to look into that, but I don't know. Meghann, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I think actually Commissioner Begick's also been involved with some changes to various veteran services at the county levels. I know Representative Elder at the time represented Bay County. He's no longer in the legislature. He was didn't get reelected last year. Having some conversations, we actually just had Representative Hope into the HHS committee. She had some bill drafts related to the makeup and how the Board of Commissioners would have different options as far as their veteran committees and different groups. So there's been some conversations, and just the county veterans service area. I don't know particularly on that one, Vaughn, but I think we're open to looking for it. I know you guys have been working on some legislation up in Bay County, and we can see if that's something we can move forward, or if there's a bill sponsor in Lansing that wants to take it on.
But I think we're also still looking at potential changes to some of the veteran property tax exemption bills that are out there, and looking at how do we still provide a tax exemption maybe for those veterans, but maybe not necessarily a property tax exemption, or counties or locals get reimbursed from the state for those exemptions. So that's something we worked on, I believe, last legislative session. We'll continue to work on this session with a little different strategy as well.
Yeah, we've brought those veterans groups in to talk a little bit earlier. It's not soup yet, it's not ready for introduction, but we are having those meetings. It's probably going to originate in the Senate. And I know Senator Barrett has a bill up for disabled veterans again this week, but that's for student loan forgiveness. So just
Okay.
there is going to be a lot of veterans activities, I think, in the legislature this term.
Any other questions, Derek?
Yep. Yes, Steve, this next one is for you regarding the federal aid package. Is there a population minimum for COVID funding, from Don Brown?
No, there's no population. Every county in the country would be entitled to direct funding, and that money would be distributed by your population. So U.S. Treasury would appropriate it right down to those locals. So no population threshold for counties. The city distribution model is a little different, but for counties, it's strictly based on population.
Okay, next question from Jerry Becker, and we're moving back to the OMA issue. Just to confirm, if we choose to go under a local state of emergency, does that cover our townships and other municipalities?
I don't remember the answer to that. Do you guys remember the answer to that?
I'm pretty sure it does. If I recall correctly, I believe that would cover any city or township if you're all under a local declaration.
I believe so.
We talked to MML and MTA about that because they were concerned that if a county chose not to, depending on that city or township, really the city charter, they didn't know if they could declare their own. So really, they were advocating for some additional language that would allow a charter city to make sure that they could move forward on their own if a county didn't have a local emergency. So I'm 99% sure that would work for them.
Yep.
But do they have the ability, and Meghann, you took this across the finish line last fall, do they have the ability to declare their own state of emergency if you're a township, or is it just if you're a charter city? Do you know?
So now both would be able to.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Anything else, Derek?
All right, that gets us through our questions. Just close out show a difference of opinion amongst our board members on comment. Stan Ponstein in Kent County is very eager to stop using Zoom. And Board President Veronica Kleinfeld of Macomb just wanted it to be known that she does not want to be meeting in person until she's eligible to get a vaccine. So there's two different viewpoints on OMA right now from the MAC board. And that is all of our questions and comments.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you to DTE Energy for sponsoring this podcast. Thank you, Deena and Meghann, for your insight, and look forward to talking to everyone next week. Have a great day.
Bye.